Hi, welcome to our Salt Lake City Q&A. I'm Mayor Erin Mendenhall, and I'm joined today by department and division directors to answer your COVID-related questions. You can send us these questions through Facebook chat or through Twitter. We'll be monitoring both streams. And we're going to kick things off with introductions from each of the directors, beginning with Ben Collender, our Acting Director of Salt Lake City Economic Development. Take it away, Ben.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, everyone. Ben Collender here, as Mayor said, Acting Director of Salt Lake City's Department of Economic Development. In our department, we have the Business Development Team, the Arts Council, as well as the Redevelopment Agency. Happy to be here with you and answer your questions. Chief Lieb.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, Salt Lake City. I'm Carl Lieb. I'm the Salt Lake City Fire Chief. I just want everyone to know that all of our stations are fully staffed and they're responding to calls as they come in. And do not hesitate to dial 911 if you're having an emergency, certainly outside of the COVID pandemic as well as anything else. We are here for the residents. We're also receiving masks these days at every fire department, every fire station, I should say, either homemade masks or commercially made masks. So look for the bins outside the fire station if you want to help out. Thank you. I'll pass it on to Public Utilities Director, Laura Briefer.
Thank you, Chief Lieb. My name is Laura Briefer, and I am the Director of Salt Lake City's Public Utilities Department. In our department, we have the drinking water utility, wastewater, stormwater, and streetlights. And I want to say on behalf of all of my more than 400 employees, we are a dedicated workforce, and our commitment is to continue to provide this critical service to you. Thank you very much. Oh, and I'm going to pass it along to Lorna Vogt, the Acting Director of Salt Lake City Public Services Department.
Hi, good afternoon, Salt Lake City. I'm Lorna Vogt. I'm the Acting Director of the Public Services Department. We have 11 divisions within our department. They include golf, youth and family, streets, facilities, the urban forestry, trails, natural lands, parks, and compliance divisions, all of whom are doing their best to keep the city running during this time. And we're really happy to be doing that for the residents of Salt Lake City. And I'll kick it off to Chief of Police, Mike Brown.
Good afternoon, Salt Lake City. This is Chief Mike Brown, the Salt Lake City Police Department. It's a great afternoon to be with you and hopefully answer some of the questions that might be on your mind. I want everybody to know that we're fully staffed, we're doing well, we're ready to serve. So if you need us, please call. And just so you know, we've been very, very careful. We started early, but we have no confirmed COVID cases within our police department. So we're doing very well. I'd like to pass it now to Pam Lofgren, who is the Director of Salt Lake City Emergency Management. Pam, take it away.
Thank you, Chief. Again, I'm Pam Lofgren, and emergency management's role is to assist our government and our community to be prepared for response and recovery when disasters or incidents occur. One of our primary roles is to manage the Emergency Operations Center, where our unified command and coordination teams which consist of various departments throughout Salt Lake City, support incident response. And we're happy to answer your questions today. And I will now pass it on to Weston Clark with Community Outreach.
Hello, Salt Lake City. I'm Weston Clark. I'm the Director of Community Outreach for the Mayor's Office. I work with our Mayor's Liaisons and the Community Councils and the general community at large to get messages out to the community from the city and help the city navigate or the residents navigate the city when they need help. I'm happy to be here today.
Thanks, everybody. Our first question is, what's the purpose of the tattle line? I think I know what you're talking about. That's not what we're calling it. It was absolutely conceived because the number one issue was that our 911 was being bombarded with phone calls of people wanting to say, I think some people outside or a neighbor are violating the social distancing order. And although that is a health issue, our 911 line is not set up for those kind of calls. Our number one job as a city, pandemic or no pandemic, is to keep people safe. and the 911 dispatch system needs to be able to function and answer those calls for medical and other emergencies. So it became clear pretty quickly that we needed to open up a different way for people to communicate, whether it's a business or a public concern about social distancing. Chief, do you have anything you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mary Mendenhall. That's exactly right. 911 is if you have an emergency, if there's an in-progress crime, something that's, an emergency in nature. So please remember that. The line really is for those that need to go back and follow up and to do any type of education or to ask for voluntary compliance. And we get those calls all the time, and we'll go out, but our whole goal is to make sure that we can educate people of the why we need social distancing and why we're doing these things, because it's so important. So 911, that's not the call. Please call us at 799-3000, or you can use that tip line. Thank you.
And if you actually want to use the tip line, you can go to the Salt Lake City Mayor's Office page, click on the COVID tab, and there is a link there for you to get to the line. It's actually an online form for public complaints, and there's a business complaint phone number, which takes you to Salt Lake County Public Health Department. All right, our second question is, why are golf courses still open? I think Lorna will probably be able to give us some details on that, but ultimately, during this pandemic situation, of course, we're still allowing people to recreate safely. So immediate families can go out and recreate together, but other than that, you need to keep social distance happening. At first, our golf courses were not able to function and put into place safe precautions for the employees and for the players. And so we did close them for a time, and golf regrouped and figured out how, by staggering tee times, putting into some physical distancing operations between employees and customers, that they could open, and probably they're serving probably fewer golfers than the demand is there for, but golfing is available with some adjustments in place to be able to keep people safe. Lorna, do you want to add anything to this?
I think you said it really well, Mayor. The golf division is doing their best to follow all the safety precautions. They think it's important that our residents and visitors can get out and get some fresh air and do it safely, but they must every single day. And so everything from keeping customers out of the clubhouses, cleaning the restrooms after every use, and having online check-in, taking away the golf carts for now. We're doing all of that to keep the public safe and our employees safe, and we'll continue to do that as long as we have good compliance. But the golf division will keep an eye on every course every day, and we'll report back on if we see problems, and then we will take measures if we have to for the public safety.
Thank you, Lorna. Okay, our third question is, I wonder if the city will consider allowing companies to reopen if they follow CDC guidelines, including wearing a face mask. I'll tee up Ben with economic development to help me on this one, but I think know that on a day-to-day basis, we're working with the public health department and looking at the data that's coming out, local data that's helping us guide these decisions. And it is a dial, it's not a light switch. We're not going to see a scenario where we say everything's open again and all social distancing measures are removed. We're going to be looking at that data, which is detailed, and I'm not a statistician, so we're grateful for the experts with the public health department who are helping us make those policy decisions based on the data, but partially it's about the rate of spread. And we know from data released on Friday afternoon from the county health department that Salt Lake City is the hardest hit in the county, and that certain zip codes in our city in particular are being the hardest hit. So I think we're a ways away from that dial starting to crank back open again. But we are going to be making decisions from a data-based and public health perspective, and then doing everything we can to support our people and our economy as we go through this. Ben, you want to add anything?
Thank you, Mayor. No, that's a great response. And I think that point that you mentioned in terms of being a dial rather than a light switch is really important. As we think of reopening our economy, we have to think carefully with the public health perspective in mind, because if we treat it like a light switch and we just flip the switch and we say, okay, we're 100% go without certain precautions, then what happens is you slip back into this urgent phase where it becomes a public health issue that becomes harder and harder to address. And so, as the mayor says, this is first and foremost a public health concern, and we're doing everything we can to think about it from an economic perspective and do everything we can. And some of the programs that many may be aware of, the emergency loan program and the Tip Your Server program that we've been so invested in, are a couple of examples of what we're trying to do to bridge our economy to get through this public health crisis.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Our next question is, can you tell us more about the mask donation program? Yeah, we, as you know, PPEs, the personal protective equipment, is in short supply nationally, if not worldwide at this point. And it's most important that our healthcare providers and our first responders have access to those pieces of equipment, particularly the N95 masks. But for all of our frontline employees, particularly those who are coming into contact even occasionally with people in the public, that could be someone doing a building inspection or business licensing, or even our firefighters and police officers, although I'm going to let Chief Brown and Chief Lieb talk a little bit more about that. We want to be able to get even our parks employees have those masks in hand. I'd love to be able to have all those Salt Lake City frontline employees with 2 masks, one that they can wear and then another that they can launder. So we've asked the public to help us. And this was really after hearing from dozens, if not more than 100 people in Salt Lake City community saying, how can I help? I'm home. I don't know what to do. I can't, I'm not going to go out, but how can I contribute and help? And so I think that this is an opportunity for people who have the means and the time available to make masks that will be used right here locally in Salt Lake City. And in addition, Chiefs, I hope you'll talk a little bit about that. If we receive enough masks, we'd like to be able to supply police and fire with masks that they can give to members of the public as they come into contact with them, particularly people who are in vulnerable populations. Chief Lieb, do you want to go first on that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. As most people are aware of now, the CDC recommends the use of face masks for everyone during the pandemic. And as a result of that, we have had a lot of opportunities for donations throughout the city and the county. Quite frankly, we have a lot of people who have something to offer, either homemade masks or access to commercially made masks. So it was time to organize that effort. And in doing so, we established the mask donation program, as I spoke of earlier. Right now, at any Salt Lake City fire station, we can receive those masks, whether you make them at home, whether you have access to some commercially made. And we will use those across Salt Lake City. We'd like to have every Salt Lake City employee have availability of a mask. And as the mayor said, in the fire department, we want to use some of these masks also for our patients. We are not at the current time in dire straits as far as masks go in public safety. I think I speak for Chief Brown in the police department as well. But citywide, we could use more masks. So just to protect you as a patient potentially in an EMS scene and the firefighters as well, we would ask that the patient wear a mask as well as our personnel. So optimally, everyone would have access to a mask. As the mayor said, nationally, this has become a problem. But I think, honestly, in Salt Lake City, with the give and the people who want to help out and just the way we come together in this state, I think ultimately we're going to be okay. Chief Brown?
Yes, the PPE that we wear is vitally important for us. And so to anybody that calls fire or police, rest assured that our officers are going to show up wearing PPE. We may look a little different, but it's to protect ourselves, but also to protect those that we serve. We're going to be wearing our N95 masks. We'll have some sort of eye covering. We'll have our gloves. But if we need to, one of the most important tools that we have is these cell phones. Every officer has a cell phone, and we can do a lot of the communication over the phone. If it's critical and we need to talk face to face, we actually have some PPE that we can give to you that will help protect you also. But don't let that be a fear or concern. If you need us, call. We'll come wearing our PPE, and we'll help you too. But the masks are critically important. If we can get enough masks like the mayor talked about and Chief Lee did, we'd love to have some of those that we can hand out, because that's what we needed to do in the future here to keep everyone safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Chiefs. You also sort of answered our next question, and I don't know if you want to add to it or not. You don't have to, but it's about, if I need the police or the fire department, how can we be sure being face-to-face with them is safe? So Chief Brown, you've just said that officers are in masks with eyewear and gloves. Chief Lieb, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I do, Mayor. Real quick, I think the precautions that the public safety organizations in Salt Lake City are taking right now starts with the dispatch. If you call dispatch 911 for an emergency, they're going to ask you some questions about your current symptoms. If you have any flu-like symptoms, if you have any potential viral symptoms, and that's going to be relayed to us in the street, and our firefighters and our police officers are going to show up to your residence or your place of business or wherever you are on one of Salt Lake City streets, and they're going to be wearing a mask. And they may be trying to initiate social distancing while they're on the call as well. Instead of 4 firefighters, for instance, that are trying to help you out with a medical scene, you might just be addressing one. He might be coming to you with a mask, with glasses, gloves on, and he might ask you to put a mask on as well in case you are potentially sick. So that's how it'll look. It's a little different than how we would normally operate, but suffice it to say, if you call us, we're going to come in the same numbers. We're going to come just as fast. We're going to take care of you with the professional care that we always give.
Thanks, Chiefs. Our next question is, won't getting more people on the streets cause more crowding problems? I think this is in reference to our Safe Open Streets program that we announced yesterday. I think perhaps it was the day before that, actually. It might have been Monday. And that survey is live and open right now. What we're asking Salt Lake residents to tell us, and that survey is open until about midnight on Sunday, is you get to look at a map, and the city's identified a few street corridors where we're considering a temporary closure just during this emergency declaration, or rather an opening to more pedestrian use, which could include bikes, strollers, scooters, roller skates, whatever you want. But it does not completely eliminate traffic. So this concept would allow local traffic to continue. And I think it's true, Lorna, correct me if I'm wrong, that these are all residential streets. I might be wrong on that one. There's quite a few streets on the map. But basically, our city departments through this entire pandemic and normally are looking around the country at what kind of innovative approaches other city departments around in other cities are taking to address social needs, health needs, etc. And this is an idea that has come out of a couple of other cities because not unlike Salt Lake City, demand for parks, open space, trails is just skyrocketing right now. It's warmer. Kids are home from school, or rather they're homeschooling, and parents, myself included, really want to get our kids outside and get some energy out. And so our parks are seeing a lot of demand on them with the playground closures and other certain amenities being closed. It's really hard to keep social distancing going sometimes in parks. So this is an opportunity that we're exploring with the public right now to see if you might want us to create more space outside for you to go for a walk or a bike ride or let your kid ride their tricycle around. So Lorna, can you correct me if I missed anything or was inaccurate about residential streets?
No, you got it exactly right. And just to echo what you said, people got to get outside. This has been a tough, I don't know how many weeks it's been now, but it's been hard. And with the weather warming up, we need to create more space for people to move around. And every single trailhead, the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, Jordan River Trail, every trail is seeing a lot of people, and it's tough to maintain social distancing. We're seeing a lot of jam ups at trailheads, and that causes problems for folks in the neighborhood, for residential parking. So anything we can do to open up more space for people to get out and breathe some fresh air and relieve some tension would be really great. And I know Laura has some concerns about our watershed as well.
Yeah, we are seeing some unprecedented use in our watersheds. As many of you probably know, much of Salt Lake City's drinking water supply comes from the watersheds in Little Cottonwood, Big Cottonwood, Harley's Canyon, and City Creek Canyon. And just as Lorna and Mayor Mendenhall said earlier, the demand for trail recreational use is quite high. What we are asking in our watersheds is that people practice leave no trace principles. That goes, maybe go before you go. For instance, we have a lot of we don't have as many bathrooms in our trailheads as we wished we did, and we're working closely with the U.S. Forest Service on making sure those are maintained. But really, let's practice leaving no trace and helping to keep our water supply clean. Thank you.
That was a nice way of saying, please don't go to the bathroom on our trails or in our open spaces. So I'll just translate that. Thanks, Lorna and Laura. And I got a note from Weston Clark that some of the streets are not only residential. So anyway.
900 now. Sorry, Mayor. 900 South is one of the options out there. So there's some connecting streets that are not quite there.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And Weston, can you tell us, is the link to the survey on the mayor's office website or transportation?
It is on transportation for sure. I'm not 100% sure if there's a link from the mayor's site, but we can get one up.
We'll just direct people to SLC transportation. And we can probably add a link to it here on the chat somehow. Okay, number 7 question. Is there a plan for the homeless? They are vulnerable and the spread is highly likely. Of course, this population, the vulnerable population of people on our streets and in the shelters has been one of our primary concerns from the beginning. I think even obviously before COVID-19, that's something that my administration has been working on from the beginning when we opened the Sugar House temporary shelter just a couple weeks into January. And that shelter is closing on April 15th today, just as we said it would when we opened it in January. April 15th historically is the date that St. Vincent de Paul Winter Overflow Shelter closes on an annual basis. And that's something that is very much a reflection of people who choose to camp and be outdoors with the warming temperatures that seasonally, that's when St. Vinny's would see a decrease in the need for that shelter. But we are under unique circumstances here, of course, with COVID-19. So we've been working very much in collaboration with service providers and with Salt Lake County on what to do about whether or not we should keep the Sugar House shelter open, keep St. Vinny's open, or some combination or iteration therein. What the service providers in the county and the city's homeless services team came up with is a continuation of St. Vincent de Paul. So Catholic Community Services and the Road Home. Catholic Community Services owns the building. Road Home Services is the entity that staffs and runs the overflow shelter. Want to keep that open into June. The proclamation I signed on Friday, proclamation number 7, allows them to do that. And they concluded that partially, I think it was about the proximity of people at our Sugar House temporary shelter. It was difficult to space people, and that's under those circumstances. Also, there's some staffing limitations that Sugar House temporary shelter was decided to close. In addition, Salt Lake County has rented an entire hotel, which you've probably heard about, that has capacity for 130 individuals experiencing homelessness who are high risk for COVID. And we don't have anyone from the county team on the line today, but perhaps someone on our team can talk a little bit more about the other homeless coordinating. So just know that St. Vincent de Paul is staying open, and now there's 130 bed, which is approximately what Sugar House temporary shelter ability, but it has the ability to space people out and keep them separate in these separate rooms at the hotel that's being rented by the county. Anybody else want to chime in on that one?
Mayor, just real quick. Hey, we're in the height of a COVID pandemic, but I want everybody to know that our outreach hasn't stopped. I mean, not only trying to shelter those that don't have shelter, but the CCC, the Community Connection Center, the social workers that work with the police department, they continue every day to go out and to talk with individuals that are experiencing homelessness and try to help them and to make sure they're safe and healthy, but also connect them with services. So that compassionate outreach is still going on, even though we're taking so many precautions not to allow this COVID thing to spread throughout our community.
Thanks, Chief. I should also mention that the Men's Homeless Resource Center in Midvale, in South Salt Lake, and the Midvale Family Shelter are in the process of testing all of the residents at those two shelters, just to be safe and thorough. And of course, everyone is interested in expanding testing opportunities across the board. And so I know that the other homeless resource centers have access to testing abilities, but not in-house at this point. Okay, the next question is explain a little about the division of powers, what the county has done, what the city has done, what the state has done. Oh boy, do we have a couple hours here? I won't get into a civics lesson, but we'll try to stay COVID focused on this. Mayors anywhere in the city or in the state can issue emergency declarations. That's something that the state gives us the authority to do. And there's certain powers that a mayor has under that declaration. I issued ours on March 10th. That's right. Yeah, March 10th, because we just, it was set to expire April 10th. It can only last 30 days. And then it takes an action by a city council to renew it or extend it. And our city council extended ours just before the 10th until May 10th. And of course, they'll have the option before May 10th if we deem necessary to extend it again. Under that power, mayors can do things like control egress and ingress in a city, who's coming in and out, implement curfews, close certain businesses, and also make it easier for us to do things like receive donations, enact contracts that are required for emergency operations, things like that. So, and under any sort of an emergency declaration, actually under even a proclamation, that is enforceable with a Class B misdemeanor. But that is not something that we've been seeking to use. But so just to let you know, it does have the force of law behind it. It isn't just a request. So we enacted our first on the overall emergency declaration on March 10th, gave me the authority to do follow-up proclamations. And that's why on Friday, I issued the 7th proclamation, and it did 5 or 6 different things actually. And most of them have had multiple actions associated with the proclamation. And that's because as we go and we learn of new needs, whether it's to protect our own employees, things like allowing directors to clock people in and out on their behalf so people don't have to come into the same location, allowing people like our police officers and parks employees and others to take home their work vehicle so they don't have to come into the garage with their shift changes and interact with one another. We're allowing the police department to stop lineups so they don't come in at the beginning of the shift and all mingle. They don't, we're not convening people that way. To doing changes at our parks and closing the playgrounds, saying that we're not going to open the restrooms like we normally do on April 1st, things like that. So the city has a lot of ability to move with specific tools, use money in more of still transparent but faster ways than we normally would. And the county, through the public health declaration, ended up, which I'm grateful for, acting over the entire county to basically take the place of some of those proclamations that I'd done just for the city. The biggest one, of course, is the closure of some businesses. And the public health order and public health departments have different authorities from the state, of course, than the city does. So one of the proclamations I did, we laid it to rest because the next day or within 36 hours, the county implemented a county overarching one that took care of it for us. And we'd rather have that county-wide approach because Salt Lake City doesn't exist in a bubble. And then that brings us to the state, who is, for the very first time in the state's history, the legislature is calling themselves into a special session instead of the governor calling the legislature to a special session. And I think it's still evolving, maybe even on an hourly basis, just what it is that they are looking to amend and change and hopefully support during this time as a legislature. But all of these actions that we've been taking as a city or as other counties are, I think, pricking the ears of the legislature. These are unprecedented times, and we are using these tools that the state has given us in the past in ways that we've never had to before. So I think the state is looking to potentially amend some of these approaches, and hopefully they'll work with us as they do that. Anyone else want to chime in on my COVID civics lesson? Don't all jump at once now. Okay, Chief, this next one's for you. Chief Brown, has there been an increase in crime during the stay safe, stay home order?
That is a very good question, Mayor. And the answer is no, there hasn't been an increase in crime. In fact, when we look at our CompStat model, and that's how we compare crime to specific time periods, but if we look at crime from year to date this year to last year, our violent crime is down 3%. Those are crimes against people. Our property crime is down 1.6, but our calls for service are up. And so we're going on many more calls. They're up about 10%. And some of the calls that we're going on in the last 30 days, going on medical ambulance calls are up about 29%. Of course, we had an earthquake right in the middle of everything. And so we had a lot of calls for welfare checks and suspicious circumstances. But I'll tell you, and this is kind of concerning, our domestic violence calls are up. If you look at domestic violence over the last week, our calls are up 5%. If you look over the last 30 days, they're up 15%. Now, those are just calls where we respond, but our caseload in domestic violence calls are up 32%. And so what we've done is we've had to assign some of our detectives from other units to take that extra caseload. And we take this very serious. We've tried very hard through our social media to let everybody know that to call us, even though that you're stay at home, shelter in place, whatever we're doing, you don't need to be a victim of domestic violence. And if you need us, call. We'll come with all our resources, everything we have. And I need to give a shout out to our victim advocates, because throughout this whole thing, they have wanted to be on the forefront, and they go out with us and they still provide all the services to victims of domestic violence. In fact, one of the things that has been very helpful in this investigation is we have some cell phones that are actually phones that we've bought that we can give to victims so that they can have a line of communication with our victim advocates, because you don't just respond on the call and then you're done. It's a process of trying to make sure they get everything they need during these difficult times. And so this phone has been kind of their lifeline to the detectives and to our victim advocates. So calls for service are up. That's okay. We're there to answer all those calls. Domestic violence, that is concerning, and we're putting a lot of effort to help victims during this time, but we need to give a shot. We need to, and the caution is, no one needs to be a victim to domestic violence.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you and your team's work on that. There's a lot of pressures on families right now, and that's a heartbreaking reality for us to be seeing. The next question is, are community council meetings still happening? How can I stay involved? Well, Weston, I know you got some answers about this. There are other meetings happening too. And I'll, before I hand it off to Weston, I'll give kudos to the Salt Lake City Council, who's been holding virtual meetings for 3 or 4 meetings now. They didn't have a meeting last week, but they've been conducting those virtual meetings really, I think they were the first in the state to do so. And they're still holding public comment during the formal meeting when their public comment is scheduled. So that's an opportunity for you to be heard by all 7 city council members and myself and the mayor's team. So if you want to communicate with us, know that you can check out the community or the city council formal meeting schedule on the city council's website. Weston, can you talk to us about community councils?
Sure. Community councils, some of them are operating. They're doing so digitally. Some of them have canceled their meetings, so it's a little hit and miss. You can either, a lot of the community councils have Facebook pages. We also have all of their contact information through the mayor's office, so you're welcome to reach out to us and we can connect you with them and give you some insight as to whether or not they are currently meeting. A lot of them are trying to push out information. Getting on their newsletter email list is always a good idea because they know what's going on and can send you information. Planning Commission, historic landmarks are still operating as far as I know, and so you can connect with those organizations. Actually, through the mayor's webpage, we also have information on how best to do that. And participate as you normally do. You can take the census. That's a great way to participate in the city by adding your count to the government. And there's a lot of other organizations you can continue to work with. There's a lot of grassroots organizations like the COVID Mutual Aid that's connecting volunteers with those who need things in the community. You can reach out to them. Check on your neighbors. Make sure you're reaching out to your neighbors and that they have everything they need. For some people, it can be really scary right now to go to the grocery store and other things. So check on them, see if there's anything that you might be able to do to help. Any of the organizations that service our vulnerable populations during normal times are probably in need even more so right now. I would contact the food bank, the Salt Lake City School District, and they may not be able to take volunteers, but they certainly can take financial donations if you can. Of course, we talked earlier about the masks. If you're a sewer, you can work on that and get us some masks that we can use. But I think in community outreach in the mayor's office, I think what we're most concerned right now is our vulnerable populations that have a hard time when times are normal. And right now, all of those issues are exacerbated. So I would say reach out to your neighbors, reach out to those organizations that service those communities regularly and see how you might be able to help.
Thanks. I'll just mention one other part that as the city isn't doing all of the functions that we normally would, for example, sending our streets crews out to do overlays and crack fills, they cannot not work in close proximity to each other and do the job safely. And so they are, we're not doing that type of work right now, but they are still being paid. And so we're asking those roles of employees with the city who don't have the normal kind of work that they would be doing, but are being paid to bring together some teams for us to amplify and support the school district, who at this point has enough food to continue feeding people age 0 to 18 meals on a weekday basis, and also providing boxes of food for families in Salt Lake City. They need more people to assemble that. And as Weston said, they may not be accepting volunteers at this point, but I've authorized our city employees to be paid to do that work at safe city facilities that we're working on setting up right now so that we can amplify that food distribution opportunity through the school district. And if you need food, please do go to the Salt Lake City School District's website, and there's information about where and when you can pick that up. Okay, our next question is about the budget. What's the city budget situation? Do we expect layoffs or impacts to city services? We are taking a conservative and realistic approach to our budget, even as we speak. Today's the day that I finalize my budget proposal, and we start to put that budget book together, which will be a virtual book this year for the first time ever in the city. And I'll present that to the council the first Tuesday in May. And that's at the public meeting. Actually, who knows how we'll do it, probably through video this year, but it'll be something that you can see and look at. It's always publicly available. We're definitely seeing decreases in our revenue streams. And as we do things like eliminate parking enforcement and decrease some of our justice court functions, and everything is changed at this point. We know already we're experiencing decreased revenue, and we know that we expect that will continue for at least a couple of quarters into the next fiscal year. And so I'm grateful to say at this point, although we will be taking a very hard look at a lot of the things that I was hoping to get done, we're in a really unique position because we were just forwarding a budget amendment to the City Council with a good deal of one-time revenue, actually more than we'd seen as a city probably ever. One-time revenue means obviously we can't count on it in the future, but we had more than we'd anticipated in the previous year's budget come through. And there were some exciting projects that I was looking forward to us being able to do as a city. We've set those down, of course, and we've set aside money to, in a specific COVID fund, $4 million, in addition to the $1 million that we've now already assigned to 52 small businesses in Salt Lake City through about a $20,000 loan program, 0% interest over 5 years. So there's $1 million going to small businesses in our city. There's $4 million that we've set aside just for us to be able to sustain Salt Lake City Corporation, keep our employees safe, and then hopefully be able to support community needs as they come up. We are not looking to lay off any employees. And like, my heart swells when I say that, because that's the last thing that we want to do as a city. And I'm grateful that at this point, that's not a reality that we are facing, but we are still in flux, and we're definitely not through the woods on this pandemic. So we'll continue to evaluate. And let me say that I have a great deal of respect and trust in the city's finance team, who are conservative and in their financial approach, and they have very open faces. So every time they tell me about something, I can see exactly how it's making them feel, and that makes it easier for me to make budget decisions. So grateful to tell you we don't expect layoffs, and the impact to city services will be as minimal as we can make it. But at the same time, our priority right now is keeping our people, our employees, and our public safe. Okay, next question. Many organizations are learning and innovating new ways of conducting business through video conferences, virtual private networks, call forwarding, etc. Has this been the case with city government and law enforcement? If so, do you see some systems remaining in place after the crisis? I think, gosh, probably a lot of our department directors have something to tell us about that. I'll tell you that we were mostly working from home by the time the earthquake happened, which was 4 weeks ago today. And since the earthquake, our City Hall sustained some damage, really mostly plaster damage. So the seismic structure in the building did what it was supposed to do with the base isolators. But we haven't gone back to work in City Hall. So we've been teleworking and working remotely for 4 weeks now. Of course, we have a lot of other buildings that are out there, public utilities, parks, our IMS department. Of course, there's a public safety building, and those buildings are operating to some degree, if at all. I can't wait to go back to City Hall. I think a lot of our City Hall staff feel that way, but I think it goes without saying that we didn't realize, I think like a lot of organizations and businesses out there, just how dynamic we could be in working virtually. And I'll go a little bit beyond the City Hall to say that I'm anticipating businesses throughout the city considering whether or not they need the square footage that they currently lease or own to run the businesses that they do. And I imagine that we will see some vacancies come up in the city's office and commercial retail space. I see that as an opportunity actually for us. Certainly there will be pain as we go through this transition, but you know that I'm passionate about bringing the tech industry and tech jobs and access to those opportunities for our residents into the city. And one of our biggest hurdles right now is those businesses in that industry being able to find the kind of office space that they need. So we are working proactively, thinking proactively about in trying to anticipate what these kind of openings might be and really working to get the most for our residents out of whatever the new landscape might look like. Ben or anyone else want to chime in about working virtually?
Hi, Mayor. This is Ben Collender again. Um, uh, Maybe I can take on sort of two factors in how we thought about this. One is the internal piece. What did we do as a team? And immediately when we saw this all starting to unfold, we went 100% telework. And for us, that's been something that has been really insightful as you mentioned, Mayor, we think about it in terms of, oh, we can never do that. And then we have to, and we realize we can. And so we've been internally talking about how do we carry this on in some element beyond what we're doing now. And that has a lot of implications that we've never had, or never really, if we have some good side out of this, it's sustainability, right? If some people can work from home and otherwise they wouldn't. And we're looking at those. So there's an internal piece, but there's an external piece too. And I think what we found important out of the gate as this all started to unfold is how do we engage people in a new way? We're looking at some of the things and coordinating on some of the digital divide conversations. And we have some lessons learned out of that from our loan program. But some of the things that we did out of the gate were fairly innovative in how we engaged the community and made smart decisions really early on. Because our community was willing to respond to things like our survey and give us detailed information that was really helpful there. And as well as our colleagues created a website that has a bunch of information. And as we talked about earlier, when businesses are always asking, when can I open up? What does that look like? What are the resources available? So I'd just like to plug that one more time. And it's slc.gov/ed/COVID-19. And we're constantly updating this because the answer we'll give you today on when I can open up or what does that look like may change tomorrow. So having that line of communication is really important for us and something that we've given we're almost trying to over communicate some information to some extent to make sure that it's out there and that people have it. So those are the two things, sort of the internal factor and some of the things that we're thinking down the road, and the external factor as well in communicating.
Thanks, Ben. Next question is, what's being done to provide clean bathrooms and hand washing stations for our unhoused community? Great question. Even though the Sugar House temporary shelter is closing today, we are going to maintain 2 restrooms, just outdoor temporary portable bathrooms, and a hand washing station in the parking lot there. In addition, at Library Square, we've been maintaining temporary restroom facilities on Library Square, and the Portland Loos, which is the permanent outdoor bathroom that the city built on 5th West near the Wiegand Center, really near the former road home, will continue to be available. And then the Wiegand Center continues to function as a day resource center and has restrooms and, of course, hand washing facilities inside of there. But our housing and neighborhood development team is working at identifying several other parks in the city in which we could open up restrooms and make those available during the day and be locking those at night for individuals experiencing homelessness or anyone else. We're working through those details right now with parks, and we hope to have them open next week. Lorna, if I miss something, jump in there, but I see a few more questions if I got it okay.
You got it okay.
Okay. I also know that the county is looking at parks and areas across the county outside of Salt Lake City where they could open up facilities and both restroom and hand washing facilities to meet the needs of unsheltered people across the county. Great question. And I see that we're shooting for those to be open by Thursday, actually. The next question is, what do you say to people who don't take this seriously or think this is all an overreaction? This has been politicized, I think, across the country. And what it boils down to is science and public health. This is about data. This is about a virus that is highly contagious and that is taking the lives of our community members. So I know as a family, as a neighbor, as a community member, as a mayor, that we're getting restless and that our whole household's getting restless, and spring is springing, and we've been out of school a long time, and people want to get back to work. People need to get back to work. Businesses want to reopen. Business want their clientele to increase again. We all feel that, and this is a hard time. But this is literally about saving the lives of our community members. That is why we're doing this. And the actions that we have taken and that we led on as a city and as a county are working. And we see that in the Utah data that we have. We see that the stay-at-home measures that are in place and the social distancing that we've been practicing is working. I think the scariest part for me, and I hope the part that resonates the most with people who don't think they need to take this seriously, whether that's because they don't think their chance of becoming very sick is very high or that the rate of communication isn't that great. Two things. The zip code specific data that the county released shows that our downtown, actually 84101, is the most impacted currently in the entire county. The rate of contagion there is highest. And we have other areas, both on our west side, but a couple of the zip codes on our east side as well, that are more affected than anywhere else in the county. This is happening. It is happening right here in our neighborhoods in Salt Lake City. The other part that is really rattling to me, and you can read it on the CDC's website, is around some recent studies that show that a good deal of people, a significant number of people infected, are asymptomatic, meaning they don't even know necessarily that they have it. They aren't exhibiting symptoms, and yet they are still spreading the disease if they aren't practicing the precautions or staying home. So you might think you're not going to get very sick, but you might be spreading it. And whether that's to your neighbor or your mother or your coworkers, this is about saving lives. So people wearing those masks is so important. It's so important for us right now, even if we're only passing people occasionally in the grocery store. Please put the masks on. I know there's sort of like a social awkwardness to it. We need to get over that. We need to stop with the stigma around wearing a mask. This is about saving lives. We will get through this, but we have to take these measures, and we have to take this seriously now. All right, next one. Or Chief or Pam, you want to talk about the seriousness of the virus, Pam? I think I soapboxed a little bit on that.
Hey, Mayor, this is Chief.
Yeah.
Can I just add on a little bit to that, Mayor? And every Friday I have a chance to have a conversation on the phone with major city chiefs from across the country. And I'm talking about the commissioner from New York PD, the commissioner from Chicago PD, from the police chiefs in Florida, Louisiana, and we talk about the issues and concerns they're dealing with. And it's surreal to hear what they're dealing with because it's real. And I'm going to give you props, Mayor. Thanks for having the fortitude to make that declaration when you did, because I know through what you've done and what we have all done as a city that we are saving lives today. We've kind of had a crystal ball to look into the future and see what would be best for our community. And so we've learned a lot, but the precautions we're taking, they will save lives, and they're very important for us to continue doing. So thank you.
Thanks, Chief. I'll mention one more piece about the healthcare system. We know that almost 90% of the ICU beds and about 80% of all the hospital beds in the state are in Salt Lake County. And for the virus will spread to the rural areas in time. We need to be able to service those hospital needs and not have an overwhelming of the healthcare system take place. And so this spacing out, this stretching out of the spread of the virus, the slowing of it is, it's not just for Salt Lake City community, it's for the statewide ability for us to handle the virus. And until there's a cure, this is not going to go away. And so I really appreciate thanks, Chief. And I also appreciate that we aren't issuing tickets at this point, even though I know there's a great deal of concern from the public about people violating the public health order from the county. But let's not make it get to that point, people. Let's follow this order for your sake and for your neighbor's sake and your coworkers' sake. We can do this. We'll get through it. And here's my last piece. The more we do this now, get through this hard time, I think the faster our economic recovery will be and the smaller our public health impact will be. But if we keep, letting this roll out of control, which I don't think that we are as a city or a county right now, or if we open it up too quickly and flip a light switch instead of turning a dial, we're going to see a spread of the virus, and that's not something that is good for anyone in the state. Okay. The west side is being unduly impacted. What can or are we doing to stem the tide of the disparate impact of our west side communities, assuming there is anything to be done? Yes, and that is evidenced by the public health data that was released on Friday that you can see on the county's COVID-19 website. They have a virtual map there. You can click on your zip code or any zip code and see what their current data is for that zip code, and it's color mapped, so it's pretty jarring. And you'll see Salt Lake City is darker than a lot of other areas, and then the downtown core, a lot of our west side, and parts 84109, 84105, on parts of our east side also. There is a disparate impact, and the west side and the downtown is definitely, at least according to the current data, most affected. At the same time, we know that we're dealing with access to digital equity, or digital equity issues, I should say, that the city's been working to remedy and is still working to remedy. But that has everything to do with healthcare access, with education access. Our kids are learning remotely right now. And we've heard that some of the schools that even up to half of the students haven't picked up their iPads or laptops that they need to do that schoolwork. I mean, the compounding effects of systemic inequities are magnified under a crisis, and it is heartbreaking. So what are we doing? On Saturday, I sent a letter, actually it was on Easter morning. On Sunday morning, I sent a letter out to West Side community leaders, downtown community leaders, asking them to convey the urgent need for people to protect themselves by wearing a mask and staying home as much as possible. But even when we have to go to work, being able to wear those masks. We connected them with the CDC website on how to make them even without sewing, just from a t-shirt, the way you can clip it and be able to tie it securely onto your face. Tomorrow, on Thursday, we're hosting a roundtable virtual meeting with, again, a lot of those same West Side community leaders and downtown community leaders to Councilmember Johnston and Councilmember Rogers from Districts 1 and 2 will be joining me, and Selena Milner, my diversity lead for this mayor's office, will be helping us with moderating that and leading that discussion. I really don't want that discussion to be about the city telling people what's out there. We've provided all that information up front. We're asking to hear from those community members. Where are the gaps? What's working? What can we amplify as a city? Where can we bring our people, our financial resources to meet those needs even better? And that the example I'll give you is what we're doing with the school district, bringing our employees to pack food boxes. So, and one of those other illustrations of inequity that has come up during this crisis is learning that at a lot of food banks, individuals have to show identification in order to receive their food or proof of family. So if you say I have 5 kids and I need enough food for 5 kids, you have to have proof that this is your family. Of course, a lot of families don't want to show that proof or don't have that proof. And we shouldn't have those barriers to accessing food, especially at a time like this. I give major props to the Salt Lake City School District, who is not requiring people to show those kind of any identification. And so that's why we're trying to amplify these solutions. We want to hear from you. Anyone in the public, reach out to us as a city. You can go to the mayor's office website. There's a bunch of ways to contact us. Let us know, where can we help fill gaps? Where can we amplify? What do you see that we aren't seeing? We need to hear from you. We want to help. We are acting in the most dynamic and compassionate way we know how to as a city. We love you and we want to help take care of this, and we want us to recover as fast as possible. We're all the way to 101, so we're going to wrap it up with that. Thank you. Please wear masks. Donate if you can to the food bank, school district, and even to the city with the masks. We would really appreciate that so we can help our specific community here in Salt Lake City. Thank you for hanging out with us, and thanks to all the department directors for being here, who are here with us today.
Okay, we're out.